Have you ever seen a tortoise before? If you have, you've probably noticed that the shell has a lot of cracks in it, a lot of lines and uneven places. But a long time ago, the tortoise shell wasn't like that. It used to be nice and smooth like a ball or a bowl, perfectly smooth and round. This story explains how the tortoise shell came to be cracked the way it is now. A long time ago, Ijapa the tortoise woke up in his home feeling very hungry. He said to himself, "Oh, this hunger is too great. I must find myself something to eat." So he went and looked about the house. He went into the kitchen and opened the cabinet, but there was nothing there. Next he went and opened a drawer, but it too was completely empty. He went to the refrigerator and pulled it open, only to find absolutely nothing there. He looked throughout the entire kitchen, every cabinet, every drawer, every space he could look, and through the whole house. And the only thing he could find was one measly piece of bread. Plain, regular bread. Ijapa, of course, was not very happy about this. He called out to his wife, Wife, come here now." His wife came in from the other room, and Ijapa said, "Now, what is the matter with this house? Where is all of our food? Where has it gone?" His wife looked at him and said, "Ijapa now, you know there's been a drought in the land for a long time. We haven't had much food anywhere. I'll go to the market again today, but they probably won't have much food there either, you know. So we'll just have to make do." Ijapa was very disappointed to hear this and very frustrated. But, as his wife said, there was nothing else he could do but eat what he had. So he took the one little piece of bread and began munching it very grumpily. And as he was munching this bread, he looked to the calendar in the kitchen, and he noticed that today was the day of the annual festival in the bird kingdom. Once a year, the king of the birds would call all the birds of the lands together to celebrate, and they would sing, and they would dance, and of course, they would eat. And when Ijapa saw this, his mind began to hatch a plan. Next, Ijapa took his best hat and put it on his head, and he walked to the part of the forest where birds are often seen. And he started strutting about, looking very important in his very nice hat, until eventually a bird noticed him and flew down to speak with him. The bird said, "Hello there, Ijapa. How are you today? You look to be doing very well in your beautiful hat." Ijapa said, "Oh, thank you. Yes, I am well. I am glad you like my hat. It is very nice, although I do think there's one thing that could make it nicer." The bird said, "Oh, what could that be?" And Ijapa said, "Well, I'm looking at your beautiful coat of feathers. Oh, they're all so divine, so wonderful. And I was thinking, if I just had even one feather of yours to put in the rim of my hat, then it would truly be a perfect piece of work." And of course, the bird, hearing this, was very flattered, and he couldn't help but give Ijapa what he asked for. So he plucked one feather from his coat and gave it to Ijapa to put in his hat. Ijapa said, "Oh, thank you so much. Now my hat will truly be perfect and will be the envy of all the land. Thank you." And so Ijapa went back home with the feather from the bird. Then Ijapa left his hat at home and went to the same place in the forest, but this time he walked about looking very sluggish and very tired, yawning often and holding his head as if he was extremely exhausted. Then another bird saw him and came to talk to him and said, "Ah, Ijapa, what's the matter with you now? You look like you haven't slept in days. What's going on?" And Ijapa said, "Oh, my friend, you guessed correctly. I have tried to sleep, but I can't sleep well at all. My pillow at home, I don't know what's wrong with it. It's so rough, it's so lumpy, it just keeps me up all night long, and there's nothing I can think to do about it." The bird, of course, felt very sorry for Ijapa and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, my friend. Is there anything I can do?" Ijapa said, "Well, there might be one thing. I'm looking at you now and I see this wonderfully soft-looking coat of feathers, each one just like a piece of cotton. And I feel that if I just had one of your feathers to put into my pillow, it would make my sleep so much better." And of course, hearing this, the bird was very, very flattered. And he couldn't help but give Ijapa what he had asked for. So he plucked one of his feathers and gave it to Ijapa. And Ijapa said, "Oh, thank you so much, my friend. This will be a wonderful, wonderful help to me. I'm sure my sleep will be much better. Thank you." So Ijapa took the feather and he went back home. Next, Ijapa came back, and this time he came with a handful of papers, and he looked as if he was reading over them as he walked. Another bird saw Ijapa in the forest and came to ask him about it. He said, "Ah, Ijapa, what are all these papers? What is it that you're reading?" Ijapa responded, "Oh, my friend, I'm not reading, I'm looking over these. I've been trying to write a novel. You know I have aspirations to be a great writer one day, and I'm trying to work on this, but the writing just isn't coming out right. I think my pen just is not the right size. It's not the right fluidity. It's really just, I don't like the way that it looks at all." So the bird felt bad for Ijapa, and he thought, well, I'm sorry to hear that, Ijapa. Is there any way I can help?" Ijapa, of course, began to think, and he said, "Well, there is one thing perhaps you can do for me. I feel that if I had a better pen, my writing would just be greatly improved. And I see that your feathers are so long and so perfectly fine. If I had one of them to use and dip into my ink, I would write the most beautiful, beautiful novel that anyone has ever read. I'm certain of it." And of course, the bird was very flattered to hear this, and he couldn't help but pluck one of his feathers to give Ijapa what he had asked for. And of course, Ijapa said, "Oh, thank you so much. Oh, this is a wonderful, wonderful feather indeed. I'm sure this is going to greatly, greatly boost my writing, and the next thing I write is going to be the most beautiful thing that's ever been written. Thank you so much." So Ijapa took the feather and he went back home. And in this way, Ijapa continued to come to the forest with a different thing that he needed help with, until a bird came and talked to him. And repeating this process again and again, he gathered one feather from every bird in the entire forest. Now, finally, once Ijapa had one feather from each bird, he went back to his house and he asked his wife to help him to glue all of the feathers onto his body. So they worked together. They took the feathers and they took the glue and they put them all over Ijapa, covering him entirely until you couldn't even tell that he was a tortoise anymore. He looked like some sort of strange bird. He didn't look like a bird regularly looks, but if you didn't know better, you would still think that he was a bird. So now that Ijapa had disguised himself, he went to the place in the forest where all of the birds were gathering, preparing to go to the feast in the bird kingdom, which is in the sky. Once Ijapa was there, all the birds that saw him couldn't help but look in wonder and marvel, for they had never seen a bird like this before. And some of them came to him and said, "Ah, My friend, you're such a wonderful exotic coat of feathers you have. I've never seen a bird like you. Please tell me, what is your name?" And Ijapa had to think quickly, because he couldn't tell them his real name. If he did, they might recognize him and know that he was just a tortoise. So he thought, "I have taken a feather from each of the birds in the forest. One feather from every one." So then he had his idea, and he told them, "Oh, yes, I am a new bird to the forest. I just recently moved here, but my name is Everyone. You can call me Everyone." And so all of the birds thought of Ijapa as Everyone. They believed that was his name. Now the birds were preparing to fly up to the forest, or to the kingdom in the sky, where they would have the festival. And of course, Ijapa, being a tortoise, was not going to be able to fly. So he thought quickly again, and he said to some of the birds around him, "Oh, please, my friends, I hate to do it, but I must ask a favor of you. You see, I was flying the other day. Oh, I love to fly so much. Oh, it's my favorite thing. Flying, it's just the best part of my life. But the other day, as I was flying, which I do frequently, I had a bit of an accident. You see, I wasn't watching where I was going. I was so absorbed in the wonder of flight, and I accidentally ran into a tree. And when I did so, I injured my wing, and now I am unable to fly again. I haven't been able to fly for a few days. The doctor told me that I should take a break at least for a week. So I won't be able to fly, but of course I don't want to miss the festival now. So do you think you could help me out, please, my friends?" And so, of course, the birds said that they would help him. It was no problem for them. So they used their feet to grab Ijapa, and they carried him up with them as they flew on their way to the bird kingdom in the sky. Now, once they reached the bird kingdom, everyone came together in the king of the birds' palace, where the great feast was prepared. And the king of the birds was sitting at the head of the table, and he looked out, very pleased as he saw everyone gathering. And once everyone had found a seat, he began to make a pronouncement. He called all of their attention and said, "Hello, everyone! Greetings and welcome to our annual Bird Kingdom Festival. I am glad to see you all here once again as we gather to celebrate and enjoy birddom together. There will be much singing, there will be much dancing, and of course, there will be much eating. This great feast has been prepared here, and all this food is set out for everyone." Now, when Ijapa heard the king say this, his mind hatched a further plan. He spoke up and said, "Excuse me, O great bird king. If I heard you correctly, you said that this meal is prepared here for everyone?" The bird king nodded. And Ijapa said, "Well, as my friends here can tell you, my name happens to be Everyone. Is that not so? Is it not true my name is Everyone?" And all the birds who had met Ijapa in the forest nodded. They said, "Yes, his name is Everyone." So Ijapa said, "Yes, so it follows then that this feast is for everyone, and my name is Everyone. So the conclusion is this feast is for me. Yes?" Now the birds began to mumble among themselves and chatter, but after a while, they had to come to the same conclusion as Ijapa. It was as he said. The king had said that the feast was for everyone, and his name, to their knowledge, was Everyone. And so the bird king reluctantly said, I suppose it is true. That is what I said. I guess this feast is for you. And Ijapa had a great grin spread across his face, and he said, "Oh, thank you, generous, wonderful king of the birds. I didn't even expect such a wonderful gift when I came to the festival today. I am so honored and so grateful." And then Ijapa began to eat all of the food on the table all by himself. All the birds watched in wonder and amazement. They couldn't believe that one person could eat all of that food. They were so amazed they didn't even think to say anything to him while he was eating. And finally, he had eaten all the food entirely by himself, and the table was completely clean, not even a single crumb left. And at this point, the birds had been able to think a little more, and they were growing very angry. And so angry that they couldn't contain themselves any longer. So they went over and they began pecking and scratching at Ijapa. They said, how could you be so selfish? You ate this entire feast by yourself. What kind of a man are you? What kind of a bird are you? And as they were pecking and scratching at him, the feathers that he had glued to his body began to come off and fall off all around him. And eventually, it was revealed that he was not a bird at all. And they could see that it was, in fact, the tortoise, Ijapa. And they recognized him and said, so now we understand. This is another of your tricks, Ijapa. But you won't get away with it this time. And the bird king spoke up and said, "Ijapa, you have gone too far this time. Your treachery has brought a great, great dishonor to the bird kingdom. You will be punished for this. You are banished from the bird kingdom, never to return. Guards, take him and remove him now." So the bird king's guards came and took Ijapa and brought him to the edge of the bird kingdom and were preparing to throw him out. And of course, because the bird kingdom was in the sky, this meant that Ijapa would have a very, very long way to fall. And Ijapa did not want to make that fall. So he became very scared and began to plead with the bird guards. "Oh, please, please. I am so sorry, my friends. I was just so hungry. You know, it's been a drought in my land. We haven't had much food. And I really needed a meal. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause so much harm now. Please, can't you forgive me? I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Don't throw me off and kill me now." So the birds were listening, and of course they were still very angry with Ijapa. But at the same time, they didn't want him to die. So they decided to listen to what he had to say. So Ijapa said, "Please, please, I understand the king has ordered you to throw me out. It's all right. That's fine. But please, before you do, go to my house and find my wife and tell her to bring out all of the soft things from the house. The mattresses, the pillows, the clothes, anything, the cotton balls, whatever she can find that's soft, bring it out and make a big pile so that I'll have something soft to land on when I fall. And I won't just end my life. Please, please do this for me." So, taking pity on Ijapa, the bird guards agreed, and they flew down to go to his house. But it was a bit of a long way down, and as they were flying, they thought more about the feast that they had missed, all the food that they didn't get to taste a single bite of, and they began to get a little bit angry again. So when they did get to the house, they called out Ijapa's wife, and when she came, they told her, "We have come from the bird kingdom where your husband Ijapa has played a very bad trick and ate all of the feast, and he's being banished. But he wanted us to tell you something. He wanted us to ask you to bring out all of the hard things from the house. Bring out all of the tables, all of the chairs, the television, anything that is hard, wood or stone, and to pile it up outside of the house." And Ijapa's wife did not understand this, and she said, Now, why is my husband asking for these things? Why would he want me to do all that work? Those are heavy things now. And the bird god said, am I a Japa that I should know his mind? I'm not your husband. I don't know what he's thinking. He just told us to ask you this, and that is what we have done. Now we shall go. So the bird gods went back, and after they left, Ijapa's wife did as they said. She went in the house and dragged out all the tables, all the chairs, the television, anything that was hard and solid, and she piled it up outside. Then when they got back to the bird kingdom, the bird guards told Ijapa that they had done as he had asked. And he said, okay, thank you. I understand I did wrong. I'm sorry, and I'm so grateful that you've taken this pity on me. I'm ready, you can throw me out. So they picked Ijapa up, they carried him, and they threw him from the bird kingdom. And he began to fall and fall a long way. And he saw below him a pile of things. And he thought, this is wonderful. My wife, she has piled the soft things for me to land on. This will be great. So he closed his eyes and just let himself fall and fall. And finally, when he reached the bottom, whoosh, there was a great crash as he slammed onto all of the furniture, all of the hard things that his wife had brought out, and it shattered his shell into many pieces that flew all over the place. And Ijapa got up. He was very sore. He was very upset, but he was still alive. And his wife came out when she heard the noise, and she couldn't believe what she saw. He was a bare tortoise with no shell whatsoever. So the two of them had to go about and gather up the pieces of his shell one by one and bring them back. And then they took the glue from the house and used it to glue the shell back together again. And that is the story of how the tortoise's shell became cracked. Once they put it back together, it was no longer as smooth and round as it had been before. Instead, it now had all these cracked pieces and these cracked lines. This story is an example of a pourquoi, or an etiological tale. These are stories that explain why something is the way it is, or in other words, an origin story. Now, a lot of times these stories use fantasy and magical elements to give explanations that aren't necessarily realistic. So depending on your child, you might want to explain to them that they shouldn't take things too literally in the story. Now, I learned this tale from my grandmother, who learned it growing up in Nigeria through the oral tradition. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to find a version of it in any book. But there is a book that has a lot of other Ijapa tales in it, a great collection called Ajapa the Tortoise, a book of Nigerian folk tales. This is a collection by Margaret Bowman, and it's published by Dover Publishing. It's available in print and an ebook from Dover Publishing, and a lot of other vendors carry the ebook as well. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed this telling, and I hope that you'll enjoy sharing tellings of your own with the children in your lives.